Welcome to the O'Reilly House Museum in the heart of Placentia. My name is Emma and let's have a tour. So these are our tour guides, our student tour guides. This is Landon and this is Ryan, and they will be giving you a short tour today. The museum is open 7 days a week, 9 to 5 every day. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hi, I'm Landon. I'll be taking you on a tour today.
I'll take you through the living room. This organ was donated to us. It was one of the only things to survive a house fire. And then after it survived the house fire, it was donated to us to be put on display. This record player was an old crank record player that would be used around the same time, not the house was built, but the house would be heavily in use. It used to be done by a crank on the side, which no longer works because of the age of the thing itself. This would be the dining area. This would they would eat their meals, and this cheese dish would be over 150 years old. And then this over here was a tea service used to serve Prince William Henry back in 1786, and it's made completely out of silver in comparison to copper kettles that were used by most Newfoundland families. This is just some history in here of the museum itself, from when the family that owned the house first came here and back for the 1800s, even before the house was built, and then talks about how the house was built in 1902 and how it was moved from straight down through the O'Reilly family and all the people who lived here, and then straight to the Historical Society opening it as a museum.
Right in here would have been the maid's nook. She would have served tea and food through this little spot right here. This leads right into the dining room. Over here, this is called the butter churn. This is where they would have made their butter. This also still works. And we have some nice old dishes here and old tea sets. Right here is an old sewing machine. It was hand cranked and it actually still works. Here's the second dining room. Is this nice cutlery right here. This is actually a hen with a salt and pepper shaker, which I think is pretty neat. Some egg holders, a toast holder. And these are like fortune cookies without the cookies. Just pull one out at supper every night, every evening.
This would be the kitchen and the stove where they would prepare their meals. This would be the day bed where they would have a rest during the day if needed.
This is an old meat finder we've recently found in our storage. This also still works, but you have to be very gentle with it.
How was the winter here?
Winter probably would have been cold, but they did have 4 fireplaces plus the stove to keep them warm, so it wouldn't have been too bad.
And then we'll make our way up here. Just be careful of your head, that's all. And this would be the maid staircase, primarily used by the maid. This room in here goes on to detail and talk about more of the European and Spanish history of Placentia, talking about how European people had came over as early as the 1500s and were some of the first to settle in Placentia. And these are some old headstones that I believe were from a graveyard not too far away from the home, which is why they're put up on display here. And then there's some old fishing tools there.
In here, these are just some paintings of what Placentia would look like back then. These were all made by students of Laval High. They are all graduated now. These would have been made 4 or 5 years ago.
Did you study here?
Yeah, I go to Laval High.
What's it like to live here?
It's really nice, it's calm, it's away from the city. It's good.
And the people, how are they?
Really friendly. You don't run into anyone who's really mean or anything. Over here, These are actually out of an old oven. All these little bits of clay. And that's an old fish hook with a weight on it.
This room goes into detail talking about some of Placentia's history with how the U.S. came here to have a base from the 1941 to 1994. They operated Argentia as a naval base during the war and everything. This is where Roosevelt and Churchill signed the Atlantic Charter, just I'd say about an hour out from Placentia in Ship Harbor. And here are two hand-built replications of the old hospital that was just down the road in Placentia and the old railway station that was in Jersey Side. And then some more pictures and history on Newfoundland and Placentia mainly. And this is a picture of the SS Bruce, I believe one of the first ferries to ever make its way to Newfoundland.
Right here, this is the old train station. This was on top of Jersey Side Hill. There's now a playground in its place. This train track used to go all through Newfoundland, all up the island, and it ended here in Placentia on this end. I actually used to live at the bottom of Jersey Side Hill, and then I moved over into Placentia when I was around 3 or 4 years old. Right here is a picture of old Jersey Side Hill. This would have been in front of the train track, and then this would have been the train track, so this would have been behind that picture. Over here we have the old hospital that got tore down. It wasn't too long ago. It's a good bit. There's a picture in here. This is actually the O'Reilly house here, and this is the old hospital where it used to be, but they tore it down and made a new one. This cash register just behind you here actually does still work. And I just find all this very interesting.
Is that a radio?
Yes, that is a radio, yeah. That would have been around 1940s, late 1930s to early 40s.
So how far back do the items here go?
In this room?
Yes.
Most of it is around the 40s, around when the war was. That's what most of this room is about. Some of this over here, the pictures were took like 100 years ago. I know this one right here is 1899. It's of Placentia before the bridge was built. And actually, when the first bridge was built, just a couple of weeks after it was finished, it got washed out and they had to build a new one.
These are some pictures and photographs on Argentia and some old newspapers. And these are actually checks that were administered when people were asked to vacate their homes when the U.S. was coming in to create bunkers and everything. Bunkers and just to make the naval base in itself.
Right here is actually a newspaper from the 1990s about all the pollution that the Americans left down on the base when they left. And this is a decommissioning paper from when they up and left in 1994.
And this is a gas mask that was recovered from one of the bunkers along with a whole bag as well. And this is an old picture before they had moved in. It was just the same as Placentia was and relatively still is an old fishing community. And we can come in here. This talks about more of the French history of Placentia, talking about how they had come over in the early 17th century and how it's still Britain and France were arguing over Newfoundland, like who owned it and what it was. And this is just some old artifacts. This is an old harpoon that was used. And this is a model of an old ship that would have been used around this time as well. Some old cannonballs on the bottom as well, and then some bottles that were recovered from the sea.
Right here we have some really nice old Newfoundland coins. And just to the right we have some old postal stamps and horns, which I think are very neat. here on the end, we have some old binoculars that were donated to us, and a nice watch.
This is the bedroom. This will be one of the bedrooms, but the only bedroom that we have open for tourism. Just some things in here. The bed and this mason jar was believed to be used over in a church in Red Island. It's over 150 years old as well. And then there's some old garments of clothing that would have been used around the time of the O'Reilly house. And the closets aren't very deep because if they were, they would have been taxed for a deeper closet. Because the family that was here were very wealthy. This was one of, if not the nicest house in Placentia during its time. Again, another sign of wealth is the curvature on the top of the trunks, meaning that all of their storage or clothing or whatever they were transporting anytime they had to go somewhere, they were always on the top. Nobody's stuff was on top of theirs.
This would have been the eldest daughter's room. Right here we have some old postcards ranging from the 1900s to the early 1990s. Over here, this is an old hair crimper. And right here, we have some small Chinese opium.
And the room just over from this would have been the master bedroom. And then this is an old couch that was used in the priest's house that was in Argentia as well. And then this is a picture of the church and the house that was in Argentia, which also would have been torn down when the US was to move in there. And then we come in here, this room just mainly talks about the Newfoundland's resettlement, when people were asked to leave the areas they lived in, or mainly not even asked to leave, they just couldn't afford everything that the government was asking of them, and they'd moved to offshore settlements to live off their land, and they would get monthly, every 2 months, they would get food and food sources, like pretty much gifts from the government really, but it would have to be still paid for. And then as time went on, people that were resettled over there's a map over here of certain areas that was used when they were to go offshore resettling. They would be from Placentia and they would go as far as all the way up through here and down through Petit Fort and everything. And then these are some of the religions that were practiced over there, because as people were to move over, they obviously weren't going to leave their religion. So they had churches built and chapels built, and there was schools and stores even. And it only lasted about 27 years, just over, almost 30 years. And ended in about 1977, I believe, was when they said most people could come back to the island if they wanted to. There was more of an opportunity for them, but some people, as they had lived their life in Newfoundland and offshore, resettled and everything, they had no real reason to go back because they were happy.
So this is one of 4 fireplaces in this house. They all would have burned wood instead of coal, which coal was a lot more popular at the time, but they kept the house heated with wood fireplaces. This is an old kerosene lamp. There's plenty of these around. This one's probably the biggest one in the house. All these are bottles found from the ocean, as you can tell from all the things growing on them.
And they were donated here?
Yes, they were all donated here. So we give tours, but we also clean the place, and we'll do the grass, and we'll help out over at St. Luke's Church, just lifting heavy things, or if anyone needs help out and around. We wash the windows or whatever, just keep the place tidied.
This room in here talks about Tom Cahill, who was a producer for several plays and movies, I suppose you could call them. His plays went to Toronto, Ontario, all over Canada. And then there's an old telephone here. The dial still works, but not much else. This would have been an old camera, manufactured in New York. And then this is a model of the mine that was on Varennes Island way back when. And there's some typewriters there in the ground. And then this is an old thing of ink as well. And then this chair also is from the priest's home, as I had mentioned earlier, in Argentia, which was recovered. And then on the wall here, these are just some buildings or schools that were around the Placentia area back a few years ago. And the Sacred Heart Church and the convent are the only two still standing now. But the convent is pretty well shut down, really. There's no activity in it.
Thank you for watching our tour.
We appreciate just the interest.
We hope to see you come down soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.